classified memo. The president lashes out at the FBI and Justice Department as he clears the way for its publication. We have team coverage. A win for religious freedom. Ambassador Sam Brownback and what he will do for persecuted Christians and other faith groups around the world. An Olympic first, how the Vatican is getting in on the Winter Games. And the big reveal, Punxsutawney Phil, the famous groundhog, weighs in on winter. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, February 2nd, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Our top story tonight, the memo is out. Republicans on Capitol Hill released what they say is proof of misconduct by the FBI and DOJ. This comes after the White House declassified the bitterly disputed document tied to the Russia investigation. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi begins our team coverage. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. After weeks of anticipation and spin, you now have the chance to read these 4 pages yourself. The GOP memo claims the FBI abused its power by spying on a Trump associate during its investigation of the 2016 presidential campaign. Democrats call this misleading, but Republicans say it's jaw-dropping.
To my knowledge, this is the first time in American history that the FBI and Justice Department have been weaponized through the actions of a political party.
The Republican memo claims the FBI used a salacious and unverified dossier about Donald Trump to get a secret warrant to spy on volunteer Trump advisor Carter Page. It also says FBI and DOJ officials didn't tell the court that that dossier was paid for by the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign. But Democrats say the GOP memo cherry picks intelligence.
I read the underlying documents, I read the memo, and I said last week that the memo was grossly misleading based on the underlying documents.
Good morning, everyone.
Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi says in declassifying the memo, President Trump has sent his friend Putin a bouquet. She also points to FBI warnings that the release would be extraordinarily reckless. Now, another interesting nugget that the memo says Christopher Steele, that's the author of that Trump dossier, told a senior DOJ official he was, and I'm quoting here, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. According to the memo, officials say the warrant to surveil Carter Page, that Trump associate, would never have been granted without that dossier. Wyatt?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. And we continue our team coverage tonight with reaction from the White House. Correspondent Mark Irons joins us now. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. Earlier today, President Trump lashed out at top leadership in the FBI and Justice Department. He thinks this memo shows their political bias.
I think it's terrible. You want to know the truth? I think it's a disgrace. What's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace. A lot of people should be ashamed of themselves, and much worse than that.
And late today, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said the memo raises serious concerns about the integrity of decisions made at the highest levels of the Department of Justice and the FBI to use the government's most intrusive surveillance tools against American citizens. President Trump's decision to release the memo set up a clash with the man he picked to lead the FBI. Christopher Wray did not want the memo released. That's because the FBI claims the memo is inaccurate and lacks critical context. And today, President Trump was asked whether he has confidence in Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General. He said, "You figure that one out." Wyatt.
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. And joining us now for more analysis is Jason Russell, contributing editor with the Washington Examiner. Jason, welcome back. How do you think this memo will, on the Russian investigation will impact the FBI in terms of people's view on it?
Yeah, I think, well, it'll have a minor effect, I think, especially among Republicans, of further, sowing distrust among Republicans. But overall, I think this is just one, small piece of a larger investigation. There are still many other things that the FBI does. It's not just, political investigations into Hillary Clinton or the Trump campaign, even though that's what we hear about most of all. But, the FBI is still engaged in counterterrorism. They're still engaged in other, day-to-day things that the FBI generally does, this only makes up a small amount of what the FBI does. And so that is important, obviously. There's a political effect from these investigations into the Trump campaign and the Clinton campaign. But, overall, there are still many other things the FBI does.
Let's switch gears because I want to at least ask you about what the memo doesn't say, because we heard so much about what Jason Calvi and Mark Irons report about what it does say. What does it not say? What does it not reveal? Yeah,
it doesn't reveal any kind of, I think, deep state, conspiracy, flowing through the FBI. I think it shows at least, if you're being charitable, it shows, a mistake that was made by the FBI to seek a FISA warrant without showing that the Steele dossier was, politically motivated. That was either, intentional or not intentional. We don't know for sure. If that was intentional, then yes, that was a mistake that, deserves reprimand. If not, then, there's still other, punishment or action that has to be taken.
Let me dig a little bit deeper into that, because let's talk about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA there. What should Americans know about how it works and how officials are abusing their power to conduct surveillance? Yeah, it's definitely an interesting issue that doesn't get a lot of attention. It's definitely interesting, especially because Congress just basically reauthorized FISA back in January without taking any major actions for reforming it. So, what you see is a lot of Republicans, saying, well, look how, the FBI is abusing its FISA powers, and Democrats saying, well, you had the opportunity to reform it. Now, it was a bipartisan bill, basically, to reauthorize FISA, but still very interesting that these issues are coming up, and they've been there for a while, but that when it was renewed in January, there wasn't any major action taken to reform this system. So what do you think happens next now that this memo has been released? I think next we'll probably see a Democratic version of the memo released in the next week or two, I would think. That'll have its own version of events. Definitely a different spin coming from that side, of course, and Republicans will give that document their own spin as well. So, like most political actions, this is going to be blown up by both sides, and you have to kind of find an interpretation in the middle to be most accurate. And of course, we'll continue to follow it as well as you guys. Jason Russell, contributing editor with the Washington Examiner, thanks so much for your analysis. Thank you. The House of Representatives is planning to vote next week on a short-term spending bill to avoid a government shutdown. The stopgap measure would keep the government open and funded through March 22nd. It would give lawmakers time to map out a path forward on a bill to help the Dreamers, immigrants brought to the country illegally as children. Afghan security forces uncover an ISIS hideout packed with explosives and suicide vests. The discovery was made this week in a neighborhood in Kabul. The security forces were led to the house by an insurgent who was captured during Monday's attack on a military academy. 11 died in that attack. The House of Representatives in the Philippines passes a bill that would legally recognize church-approved annulments. Lawmakers say the law would remove the burden of obtaining a civil annulment. Reports the Vatican is asking several legitimate underground bishops in China to stand down in favor of ones approved by the communist government is sending shockwaves through the church. The proposed changing of the guard is the clearest evidence yet of the Vatican's effort to reach a deal with Beijing over the state-backed Chinese Catholic Church. The goal is to resolve the status of China's faithful and their pastors. Juliet Lindley is EWTN News Nightly's Vatican correspondent. She joins us now from Rome. Juliet, reports published in the Wall Street Journal are disturbing to religious freedom advocates. Is the Vatican commenting?
No, the Vatican isn't commenting, nor is it confirming any of these reports. Vatican Secretary of State Pietro Parolin just this week gave an interview in which he just said that the Vatican is keen to maintain a conversation going and to maintain a dialogue to remove a situation of conflict and allow the two communities. He said it's not two churches, it's two communities of Catholics in China to be able to practice their faith and to be able to go forth with the work of evangelization. Now, this media frenzy comes in the wake of a post on Facebook that the former Bishop of Hong Kong, Cardinal Joseph Zen, posted earlier this week, in which he was highly critical of Vatican diplomacy and was implying that the pontiff was unaware of what was going on, and that because the Chinese government cannot be trusted, the Pope seemed to be unaware of what appears to be an opening in relations with Beijing.
Okay, so they're not directly commenting on those reports that were described in the Wall Street Journal, but the Vatican did respond to Cardinal Zen's remarks. Tell us about that.
Yes, the Vatican absolutely rebuffed any insinuations that the Holy Father is not up to speed with what is going on. They said such insinuations were surprising and regrettable. Vatican press spokesman Greg Burke absolutely made it clear that the Holy Father is very well informed of everything that his diplomats are doing at this moment.
Okay, Juliet, so give us a snapshot here in general about Catholicism in China. How many Catholics are there in China, and how does the church function?
So there are two communities. The Catholic Patriotic Association has just over 7 million followers, and they have bishops that are appointed by Beijing. On the other hand, there are 10.5 million Catholics, known as the so-called underground Catholics, that follow the church in Rome. And they are underground, and many are known to have been harassed and persecuted over the years. Now, the Vatican severed diplomatic ties with Beijing in 1951 when the communists took over.
Okay, well, we continue to follow these discussions between the Vatican and China. Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, thanks so much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
In an Olympic first, the Vatican has been invited to attend an International Olympics Committee session. It will be held next week ahead of the Pyeongchang Games in an observer role. The delegation will also attend the opening ceremony in South Korea next Friday. Coming up, one-on-one, White House correspondent Mark Irons talks to the new ambassador for international religious freedom. Plus, Punxsutawney Phil's prediction on this Groundhog's Day.
I see my royal shadow. 6 more weeks of winter to go.
Punxsutawney Phil, the famous groundhog, saw his shadow this morning. That means, according to legend, there will be 6 more weeks of winter. Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania has been celebrating Groundhog Day with Phil for more than 130 years. Sorry for those of you hoping for an early spring. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Earlier this week, Vice President Mike Pence joked about the struggle to confirm the new ambassador at large for international religious freedom.
And that's why it was a particular honor for me as well to cast not 1 but 2 tie-breaking votes to see Sam Brownback confirmed by the United States Senate.
Brownback is now in charge of promoting religious freedom around the world. Just after his swearing in yesterday, he gave a one-on-one interview to our White House correspondent, Mark Irons.
Sam Brownback, Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. Thanks for taking the time to join me.
Happy to join you. Happy to join you.
Tell me, has anyone in the administration, as the President, Vice President, the Secretary of State, given you your marching orders? What are your priorities you've been asked to focus on?
They haven't given me marching orders, but they've given me an open field. And that open field is to address issues of religious freedom around the world and to help people and to use this administration to be able to move this topic forward. They're very interested in it. They're very committed to this topic. And unfortunately, there's a great deal of work that can be done, whether it's northern Iraq and the Christian and Yazidi genocide that's taking place there, or the Rohingya in Burma, or what's happening now in China, and in, unfortunately, many other places, Iran, North Korea. There's just, unfortunately, a lot of hot spots around the world. The administration is interested in dealing with it.
Where on your list does helping persecuted Christians rank? How high?
Very high. Very high. We have a genocide, by our determination as a country, taking place in northern Iraq, a place we've invested a lot of blood and treasure, and we have a genocide towards Christians and Yazidis. I mean, this is something that's a high priority for this administration to address.
Last year, the Vice President made the announcement that USAID would play a key role in making sure funds got to Iraq to help those persecuted Christians rebuild their communities. What's taking place behind the scenes on that? Are you working with USAID? When are they going to get relief in Iraq?
Well, I will work with USAID on that, and there has been a lot taking place behind the scenes on it.
What can you tell us?
Well, I mean, you're starting to see things move. Happen. I haven't gotten the full brief on it, so I don't have any additional information to tell you about that piece of it. But what I can say is this administration is committed, and they are not just using words. They're going to be deeds. They're going to things that are happening in the process of happening. One of those is my appointment. This position has been open for a little while, and they picked somebody that I helped create the position in the first place when I was in the United States Senate. I believe in this cause, and we're going to fight hard for this cause.
And tell me why this position is so important, and why is it the role of the U.S. to bring the message of religious liberty to countries like China, to North Korea, and how do you bring that message to places like that?
Yeah, it's one of those noble causes of America. We believe in religious freedom for everybody. for wherever you are around the world, and we'll fight for it. And that's the beauty of America. There's not another country that stands up for things like this the way the United States does. And we're going to lean in now with teeth to push this topic on forward. The other thing, there's a great side benefit, a fruit of religious freedom. It's increased security. There's less terrorism if a place has more religious freedom. And that's in all the data, and that's part of why other countries really should begin to embrace in a serious matter, in a serious way, religious freedom.
Sam Brownback, Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. Thanks for being with me.
My pleasure.
And thanks, Mark, for that interview. A new book written by an American journalist promises to deliver on a tall order. The Other Francis, published in Italian earlier this month, reveals the personal side of the Holy Father. It contains 14 interviews with high-profile personalities in the church, as well as relatives and friends of the Argentine Pope. Joining us now is the author, Deborah Castellano-Lubov. Deborah has also worked in EWTN's Rome Bureau in the past. Deborah, who is the Other Francis? What do you mean when you say that?
Yes, Wyatt. Well, the Other Francis is someone who behaves and feels like anyone else, someone who wants normal relationships and wants to be treated just like you and me. In fact, in the book itself, which contains the preface of Cardinal Pietro Parolin, he even speaks of the many occasions where we see the Pope showing his simple and humble way, even pouring in a plastic cup for someone elderly a glass of water. We see the times in which, even right after being elected, Cardinal Napier tells that after the conclave, when everyone was going to greet Pope Francis, how Cardinal Diaz, who had trouble walking, was seated at the other hand of the room, and Pope Francis actually went over to him. There are so many different episodes, whether it's Cardinal Mueller or Archbishop Gonschwein, Cardinal Dolan, where they tell of how this humility and simplicity of Pope Francis has really hit the people, and the different episodes throughout their very lives.
Sure. And speaking of that, of all of those people that you interviewed, the Pope's sister, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the Vatican Secretary of State, as you mentioned, so many other high-profile church leaders, how did you get access to the Pope's inner circle like that?
Well, I've been in the Vatican for a little while now. My first experience was in 2010 at the Pontifical Council for Social Communications, but I've been working as the Vatican correspondent for Zenit, and I've had a lot of friendships and contacts that I got to know over the years, and as I developed trust, I little by little felt comfortable wanting to speak to them about who Francis really is, because so often and throughout the press we see sort of a depiction of Francis. We see headlines that may or may not capture who the pontiff really is. So why not speak to those who are really right there with him day in and day out?
Well, as you know, Pope Francis has been an inspiration for so many. He's also inspired many books about himself after he was elected. What will readers find most compelling in your book in particular?
Yes, in this book, one will find an unfiltered Francis. One will find the Francis that people may not know much about. Even, for instance, in the interview with Maria Elena Bergoglio that was actually done in Buenos Aires, we learn about the reasons for which the Bergoglio family went into Italia. Did we know that his grandmother was a fervent anti-fascist that was so adamant about speaking out against fascism that the Bergoglio family would have been in prison had they not left Italy? It was not because of poverty. They were actually pretty well off. But here we find a very close up account of what makes Bergoglio who he is and why he is doing all that he is doing now.
So fascinating to hear about the Holy Father, both as a pope and as a person. Deborah Castellano-Lubov, author of The Other Francis. Thanks so much for telling us about it.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Up next, Super Bowl preps, the wager between two church leaders leading up to Sunday's big game. Jordanian Orthodox Christians hold their annual pilgrimage to the River Jordan today. 2,000 pilgrims are marching to the site where Jesus was baptized. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. This weekend isn't just the 5th Sunday in Ordinary Time, it's also Super Bowl Sunday. The New England Patriots face off with the Philadelphia Eagles in the 52nd NFL Championship. Tickets have jumped to all-time highs, with some selling online for north of $20,000 each. This year's game is taking place in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with temperatures in the 30s and 40s. But there's a darker side to one of America's biggest sporting events of the year, human trafficking. Haley Halverson is the Vice President of Advocacy and Outreach at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Haley, thanks so much for coming back and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Last year's Super Bowl, there was over 186 buyers. There were 9 sex traffickers arrested in Houston where it was held. That's according to law enforcement there. What is being done to stop this particular issue, and how can sports fans help?
Well, we're seeing people in the federal government, local law enforcement, nonprofits, and churches all working together on the ground level in preparation of the Super Bowl and during to identify victims and potential trafficking scenarios. And individuals who are going to the game can also help by keeping an eye out, recognizing if someone looks concerned or lost, if they see someone who potentially is not in control of where they're going. So they can keep an eye out for trafficking victims as well.
Many people may not even realize just how dangerous of a situation this is, especially on the Super Bowl weekend. You're running, in fact, to let people know about this, a social media campaign. This is the second year in a row, I believe, for y'all's organization. What exactly is the message? What are you trying to get across to people?
Well, the Tackle Demand campaign, as you said, is led by our organization, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, and it blasts a social media message during the Super Bowl against combating the demand for commercial sex, recognizing that game day is not an excuse to go out and to buy sex from a woman, child, or man, and that when someone does engage in that behavior, they are contributing to the market for sex trafficking.
And of course, you know, this is something that people have to keep in mind wherever the Super Bowl is being held every year, but many Americans may not feel like this issue impacts them. If they don't live in the city where the Super Bowl is being held, they don't think about this necessarily very much. Why does this impact your regular Americans? Why should regular folks care about this?
Well, sex trafficking happens everywhere, unfortunately, not just at the Super Bowl, especially at any large sporting event or convention center where there's an increased demand because there's an increased high male demographic with excess money to spend. So everyone needs to be aware of the problems, and they can participate on social media campaigns at endsexualexploitation.org/tackledemand. They can also get involved by sharing information like the human trafficking hotline number at hotels or gas stations wherever they go, having those posted places as well in their local communities.
Like you say, it's such an important issue, and awareness is so key here. Haley Halverson, Vice President of Advocacy and Outreach at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The Archbishop of St. Paul in Minneapolis is welcoming sports fans to the Twin Cities.
My prayer for this special weekend is that all of you, teams, families, vendors, media, and all guests, have a safe and fun visit.
Archbishop Bernard Hebda, a Pittsburgh native, is also inviting fans to visit one of more than 180 parishes in his archdiocese. And finally, the Super Bowl would not be complete without a fun wager. If the Patriots win, Philadelphia Archbishop Charles Chaput will donate $100 to Catholic Charities Boston. He'll also throw in a Philly cheesesteak. And if the Eagles win, Boston Cardinal Sean O'Malley will donate $100 to St. John's Hospice in Philadelphia and send Boston lobsters. The two church leaders also have score predictions. Chaput is counting on an Eagles victory 24-20. O'Malley believes the Patriots will win 34-21. No matter the outcome, they both prayed for a safe sporting event for everyone involved. And that does it for us for tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.